Hello and welcome to Fearless DIY Music. My name is Tristan Lass, and today I'm joined by my dear friend Kevin Gamble. He and I are going to discuss a topic. As always, when we start one of these shows off, I give the floor to Kevin to see if he has any questions about recent content.
Well, hello, Tris. Good to be here as always. And I do have a quick question about some recent content, specifically about a couple of the shorts you've done this last week. And also want to plug the shorts real quick because in addition to the longer form videos, the shorts have a lot of good nuggets of things that can be acted on. So anyone who hasn't already checked those out, I recommend spend 10 minutes with the shorts section of the channel and you can come away with some really good bits of info that you can act on right away for playing or working on guitars. But anyway, the question I had is you had a couple shorts this week that sort of dealt with the topic of unfinished necks. One of them was about sanding the finish of a neck, and the other was just about dealing with how to deal with work with raised grain on a wood, on an unfinished wood neck. And it kind of got me thinking. You've talked a lot about sanding necks. So do you do that to all your necks, and how do you decide whether to sand a neck? And then what are some things people might want to know about once you've sanded the finish off a neck, what you might need to do after that to maintain it? Are there any extra precautions or steps that people will need to follow once they've done that?
All right. Well, you raised a really great point there right at the end about there's a big difference between, I do run sandpaper on probably over half of my guitars, do have some sort of sanding done to them. Now, whether or not I go down to raw wood or not is a whole other issue. I only have gone down to raw wood on a handful of guitars, and that was usually because there was something about the actual size of the neck that I wanted to alter. Now, I do run 400 grit sandpaper all the time on any guitar that I feel like I just want to have a smoother feel on, where maybe the poly or even the nitro, oh my goodness, yes, I sand nitro finishes too, just feels a little sticky to me. I like kind of the feeling of just something that has a very satin finish. Although I despise satin finishes overall, like on the fingerboard of a maple neck. Like, I can't stand that. I want that hard gloss finish right up there underneath my fingers. But on the back of the neck, I do like the sand. Now, on the guitars that I do take it all the way down to wood, they require a little bit more effort going forward. They get dirty. And one of the best ways to clean them is just to give them a quick hit with the sandpaper, and that takes off the nasties, and you're ready to go again. You can also seal them with an oil. Any oil of your choice. You could use, lemon oil, any sort of fretboard conditioner that you use. You can just rub that in, and that will help prevent, the humidity. It's kind of a humidity barrier to a certain extent. It's definitely not as effective as leaving the finish on the neck, and that's the other big thing you've got to watch for. When I was talking about raising grain or whatever, sometimes you'll feel the grain kind of get, you can really feel it. And that means that your neck has taken on some water. And what you can do at that point is just sand it flat again. And that should take care of it. In the meantime, you will maybe have to do more truss rod adjustments. But for me, it's all about the feel. It also makes the guitar feel like it's a beat-in vintage instrument, if it isn't already. I really go heavy on sanding on my guitars that are already beaten up, because it's just like, well, there's nothing aesthetic here that I'm trying to maintain. I just want the guitar to be right in my hand. So I'm pretty liberal with it, but that's about all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and you talked about smoothing a finish with sandpaper. It sounds like you think 400 grit sandpaper is kind of the sweet spot for the right coarseness to smooth off that gloss finish, in your experience.
It is for me. I think that a lot of people would go to like a 600 or even a really fine steel wool. The thing about using steel wool on a neck that has a good thick finish on it, the beauty of that is that it's easily reversible. Once you start hitting things with that abrasive grit of a sandpaper, you're getting into, then you have to resand it all the way out to being at, buffing buffing level again if you plan on reselling the instrument. And this, of course, is not something you want to do to something that you either are planning on keeping as an heirloom or you're planning on reselling, or if it has crazy dollar value. I mean, you can do it to any guitar that you want if it is going to be your player, if you're going to be keeping it. You can go through the history of, 58 and 59 Les Paul bursts, and almost all of them had their necks sanded, by whatever artist ended up with one and coveted it, is like, this is my most treasured instrument. And they just sanded the crap out of their necks all the time. And it's funny to just kind of think about that, because these are the most, worth more than anything else on the planet as far as electric guitars. And almost all of them have some sort of alteration to the finish on the back of the neck, So don't be scared of it. It's kind of my ethos on it.
Good stuff. Thanks.
No problem. All right, well, let's get into our topic today. Our topic is, this is not going to be news to a lot of people, but maybe some of my perspective will be news to some people. I'm recording an album. I'm using a DAW as my only, source of recording and putting the whole thing together. I have been analog recording since the, early 90s. I have I've never delved into the digital universe and to this extent before. Now, what I have found in using the DAW that I use, which is Ardura 7 on Ubuntu Studio, it's a great tool. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm embracing every aspect of it for the most part, but I am still approaching the entire process as if I were recording analog still. And here are some of the things that I mean when I say this. And I think this may be of value to people who have only used a DAW and have never come from the world of analog. There is a video that I need to link to this one. It's about getting upfront sounds. It's about having, trying to get as finished a product in the room or through your outboard gear as possible going into the DAW. And that is what I have done. My vocals are compressed and have, reverb or whatever, or delay or whatever effects that I want on them right up front, so I don't have to use plugins. And my whole goal so far through the process has been to avoid plugins, and I have. So that has made it as simple as basically I set levels, and then I can do rough mixes, and I'm using it as if it were a tape machine, essentially. A tape machine with infinite possibilities as far as tracks and things like that. So it does have a lot going on that is beyond the scope of analog. But I'm really trying to get those upfront sounds. I'm also trying to avoid using EQ in the mix. So I'm trying to get my sounds right in the room so that I'm not going to spend a lot of time EQing and doing all sorts of processing there. So I think that kind of approach is something that could help a lot of people, especially when they're getting down to the mix and they're sitting there staring at those 100 tracks that are, in the session and going, okay, well, I'm going to use 5 plugins on that one and 6 plugins. And all of a sudden your CPU is blown and you're micromanaging all these different factors. And what I have done is I've tried to limit myself to the number of tracks that I use, just like I would have to in the analog world of looking at a board and going, oh, I have 16 tracks. That's what I have to work with. It's nice to, have more flexibility now. But I think that just kind of keeping that in mind, going, okay, I'm not gonna sit and use a EQ plugin on every single track. I'm not gonna use a compressor plugin on every single track. Trying to get all the sounds right as you can right up front will make the mixing experience more like, okay, I'm just setting levels, I'm panning a little bit, and it makes it a more enjoyable process than trying to, spend, days and days and days managing all of that other stuff. And that's my first point. So anyway, Kevin, do you have anything to add to that?
I think that there's a lot to that, a lot to take away from that. And I think it gets back to, or it kind of illustrates a path. You referred to kind of starting out and maybe only having a tape recorder, and we are just old enough to have kind of gone through the entire arc of digital music recording, where at the start we literally had nothing but an instrument and a tape recorder of some kind, a little mini tape recorder or a boombox or something like that. And so we have the perspective where everything that's available now is an extra, where these things have been added one after another to what originated as a process of starting with a sound. It was just, when we were recording in the early days on cassette 4-tracks, we didn't have the luxury of any post-processing apart from, the high and low EQ knobs on the 4-track, maybe, if that, as far as altering once you had put something into the system. But so the power of the environment that you're working in and come to find as normal is pretty overwhelming. And I think it's why when you listen to a lot of music that's made by maybe younger people whose introduction to recording is the virtual DAW plugin sample-based environment, they just see that as the way that you have to make sounds, and everything gets put through that filter. And I think but it doesn't change the fact that everyone still has the opportunity to kind of step back out of that and focus on, what am I saying as an artist, as a musician? What am I doing on this instrument to get my artistic vision across? And then having that be the platform for which the rest of the process is, is defined by. And so, even if you're coming backwards into that way of thinking from a place where you're inundated with digital options, it's still available to everybody, regardless of what you had when you started out.
Yeah, those are great points, and it's just, I think that the power of of using a DAW, the real power is just in the ease of use. And the fact that you don't have a lot of mechanical objects in your way. I think that's the big discovery for me, which leads me to my the next little area I'd like to explore, which is the whole idea of cutting and pasting. A lot of people, will go, oh, well, if you got a perfect, if you did that riff once perfectly and it repeats 8 times, why don't you just cut and paste it? And I think that's just a huge mistake. I think that it robs the track of feel. I think it robs it of, being organic. It robs it of nuance, dynamics, all sorts of things. I mean, if you're going to do that, you might as well just use samples all the time, or just sample yourself. And I think some people actually, that is the approach, and that's fine. But I think that for a best result, at least from my perspective, or my perspective on music, it's so easy to just stop in the middle of a take, erase what you've done, just cut it, boom, gone, toggle right back to the beginning and do another take. And that's what I found. I'm doing so many more takes this time around, and it's giving me a much better result. And I'm doing continuous takes. It's like, okay, if this is the rhythm guitar part, I'm going to play it from the beginning of the song to the end of the song. Crazy idea. But since I am playing along to a pretty substantial drum track that is, being generated by a computer, I am using a drum program for most of the drum sounds on this project.
Still not, you're not using prefab samples of playing a drum part. You still programmed those parts. You still created those parts. So I know that, but just to clear that
just
up.
To clear it up. Yes, of course. Yeah, the drum parts are all composed by me, of course. And there are tempo changes, and there are time signature changes, and there are all sorts of weird things happening with my drum machine too. But it's because I've put every note in myself. But as I'm so knowing that is rock solid, you want to have all the other stuff have a little bit of that, human feel, like it's breathing. You can do a little give and take. You can push a drum machine, and you can, there's all sorts of interesting things that you can do if you do continuous takes. And if you can't do continuous takes, practice until you can is really my only advice. And also, it's so easy. It's not like you're erasing tape or you have to like jack back into a board. I mean, anybody who's ever lived in analog world knows the pain that I'm talking about of having to do a retake. When I recorded albums and when I've recorded in the past and recorded albums, I have, often, way too often been like, that's good enough because I have to move on. It takes me so long to set up for the next thing that I need to do, and I have to get this many things done today. But with the DAW, it's so beautiful because it's just like, boom, oh, I'm not satisfied with that, erase, let's do another one. And so my advice to most people who have resorted to, kind of like, okay, you do 5 takes and then you start like cutting them up and going, okay, well, I'll use this part here and that part there and this part here. You're creating a whole mess for yourself in the mix, number one. Number two, there's no way to avoid the fact that there are, if somebody listened to that sound, that series of sounds in isolation, there's going to be continuity errors. I mean, there's no way to completely fix that with even the best, pro digital editing person in the world. There's still going to be some sense of the uncanny valley there. Just redo it. I mean, I find it so much faster just to do another take and to get that continuous take. And that might be my biggest point of this entire video, is that it's so easy. Just do it again.
Yep.
Until you get the right one. And you have infinite tracks. So you can keep safeties, and be like, well, I might not be able to ever do it better than that again. You don't have to erase that one. Do it again, though, if you think you could do better.
Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff and good perspective. And the question of time is an important one because, first of all, you're not paying for studio time when you're sitting in your office with your DAW and you're recording something. You've got all the time available. And then there's the reality that doing it the copy and paste and the cut and paste way probably ends up taking just as much time, if not more. Time. And how do you want that time to be spent? Because if it took you, 5 takes, 10 takes to find the right take and to play through the song, is it wasted time, or is that an investment in becoming better? If you've played that part 10 times, you've invested that time in playing your instrument better and more fully realizing your artistic vision for those X number of bars, and that cumulatively builds into something that is an investment in yourself as a musician and an artist. Copying and pasting, it's kind of a shallow learning curve, and then it's just very repetitious, and you're not really developing much at that point. And so this question of how I'm spending my time and what I'm spending it on, and then the result having more or less of the human feel, it does seem to me that as the DAW age kind of developed, maybe in the early 2000s and up through today, there's been more and more of that repetitive feel where you almost feel like, why should I even listen to the second verse of this song? Because it's just exactly the same as the first verse. And the idea of arrangement has largely turned into just turning tracks on and off in different sections of the song. It feels like a bunch of switches going on and off instead of actually constructing musically the development of a song. And so these patterns emerge because the DAW makes it easy to work that way, but it's not the easy things that create the memorable things and the things that mean the most to us. And even as the creator, looking back on the process, when you've fought for each of those takes to be the right take, and you hear your own individual personality throughout the entire song, and you don't hear shortcuts where you just copied one section into another section, it'll mean more to you as a creator too. So there are so many reasons why that time can be used in a way that is going to end up being more meaningful.
Yes, and then I think that, raising the issue of time is really important. I think this is the last little point that I want to make, is that in capturing a good sound up front and working on your gear in the room to get the right tone, like what I noticed is that, usually when I go to do a mix, and time and mixing is the theme here with what I'm about to discuss. I noticed that one, I'm probably going to want more treble on my voice because my voice is, to my ear, to me, maybe not to the rest of the world, but it's tough because when you're working on your own, you know, you're your own worst critic sometimes. I'm always like, I need to make it a little brighter. And instead of doing that this time, I think that I captured really good vocals in the room by working on really enunciating clearly, really clearing myself out before singing and doing lots and lots of takes before accepting a take so that things were clear, clarity. And, you know, a lot of times I think we mistake treble boost for clarity, and you don't necessarily have to do that. So that's one aspect. Another one is guitars. Guitars, a lot of times I'm like, oh, they need to be brighter in the final mix. Like when I'm mixing, I'm like, go for the EQ, and I'm like, So what I did this time is I just made sure that I got them, you know, where I wanted in my headphones when I was tracking them. You know, go back, listen to that first run. You know, even if I'm making mistakes, I'm recording because I want to listen back to hear see if my levels are spiking and to see how the tone is. And so to save time in your mix, because the mix down process is probably the most important part of any recording effort. If you have your upfront sounds right, or as right as they can be, and if your takes are solid, like rock solid, you got no timing errors, and your tones are all good, and you've hit the notes, and everything feels the way it's supposed to, the mixing process all of a sudden becomes a joy because you get to choose. You choose how loud things are. Is it going to be this loud? Is it going to be loud, quiet? Are you going to be back here, you know, where you hear a nice... So you have to start having fun. And what I've always run across in analog world is that when you have to start fixing stuff, it becomes a nightmare. You know, oh crap, that vocal's all over the place. I got to plug in a compressor now. All of a sudden, the vocal has been overcompressed because of the limiting, you know, the necessity of having to limit it more to keep it from, you know, digital distortion or whatever. And you start going down all these rabbit holes of fixing things. And I knew that was still existed when using a DAW, but this time I was just very meticulous because I don't want to use plugins. I don't want to learn all of that stuff because I'm not interested in learning it. And it's going to take time, and it's going to drain me, and I'll get just as frustrated as I used to get with analog. And what I found is by doing all these things up front, I am now facing a very easy mixing process going forward. I've auditioned these tracks. I'm almost done. 8 of them are almost complete songs at this point. There's hardly anything left to do. And as I'm going through and I'm just kind of doing rough mixes as I'm going so I can, you know, do my overdubs, I'm just like, wow, this all sounds really good. And mixing this is actually going to be fun because all I'm doing is panning and setting levels for the most part. And I think that if you take that front end approach of being meticulous and doing multiple takes and practicing and not relying upon tons of edits and tons of plugins, you will find a much more satisfying recording experience, and you'll have a better end result. I mean, you just have to, right? So that's kind of my final thing.
Yeah, and exactly. And each of those moments where you step back and thought, okay, how do I use my voice to get the sound I need on the recording? How do I change the way I'm playing the guitar to get the sound I need on the recording? Technology comes and goes. Recording technology, plugins, those will come and go. It's a kind of a short-term investment to become experts on every plugin in the universe. But every moment you take the step back and work on those things, you become a better, more capable person at what you're doing. And that in turn will also support the projects becoming more and more satisfying, because the next time you've built that accumulated knowledge, now you know what to do up front instead of even having to take the time to step back and tweak it. And so absolutely, the time spent on this kind of thing is an investment that pays off immediately and also with every subsequent project you do. So it really is an investment in yourself and kind of putting the technology into its place as a tool that, hangs on the wall and gets picked off the wall for use when you need it. It doesn't control your process. It doesn't control your thinking. It doesn't define your possibilities. You invest in your own capabilities to define what you're going to do as an artist.
Agree wholeheartedly. And thank you so much for joining me in this conversation, Kevin.
Absolutely.
Well, real quick here, would appreciate a like and a subscribe if you've made it this far into the video. We have hit the magic number of 500 subscribers as of this morning. That may vary a little bit over the next couple days, but I don't see that going anywhere. And we're moving into we're moving into bigger territory as far as YouTube is concerned and the algorithm's concerned. And I want to thank everybody who's watched a video, liked a video, shared a video, made a comment on a video, and to all of our wonderful subscribers. Want to reach out to you again and ask, let's keep pushing. We'd like to hit 1,000 as soon as we can, because then we can really kind of like blow the doors off things and start doing things like, live streams and doing more, kind of interesting interactive things on the channel. And I just am eternally grateful to everyone who's watched. All right. You take care, and we'll see you next time.